rubbing shoulders with CEOs and millionaires. I've never seen my vision be more crystal clear. Look in the mirror, see the change in who I used to be. I kept going, knew success would come eventually. But ask about me back then, they said I wouldn't make it. Nowadays they doubt less and tend to ask for favors. Poetic music, that's realness, don't let them tell you different. And if you ever lost in doubt, then follow your intuition. These words of wisdom is for those who's trying to find their purpose. Don't be living just to die, cause only death is certain. I'm working hard so I can toast to my accomplishments. Cause see, I lost it all and I ain't been the same since. I'm more focused, more ambitious, more everything. Grew up with nothing, now I appreciate the finer things. I know it's real when at the shows they ask for autographs. And now they know the name, they ain't gotta ask. Yeah.
We're good to go.
And it looks like we're getting ready to take off to the moon.
Yeah. So everyone, first off, thank you so much for listening. A very special guest here, Jerry Simon. Jerry Simon is a World War II veteran, and he was part of a bomb disposal unit back in Asia during World War II, and he'll be able to elaborate more on that. But I'm super humbled to be able to talk to a man that has served his country honorably for so many years. And thank you so much for doing this, Jerry.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So what we generally like to do is just kind of talk about, you know, where you grew up and that kind of stuff. So what year were you born, Jerry?
1922.
Wow.
That makes me a young 98-year-old. So go ahead, shoot.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So 1922. Where were you born?
In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Are you part of the old Squirrel Hill community?
The folks moved there after I left Pittsburgh, but
okay.
I'm familiar with Squirrel Hill.
Okay. I knew some people that are from there. So, great. So Pittsburgh. And then when did you leave Pittsburgh?
After 3 days after I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh in 1943.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about how your family was growing up. Were you guys observant? Were you guys kind of religious, or just, you know, that typical Jewish family that was just got to the U.S., you know?
Well, I guess I would say we were somewhat conservative to reform.
Okay.
The synagogue that we went to was for all three of those classifications. So we got a lot of exposure to the Orthodox ways of doing things as well as the reform.
Got it. And then with that, growing up, did you go to any of the camps? Did you go to shul or anything in those areas with the community?
The only outside activity I had was probably the Boy Scouts.
Oh, okay.
And I was pretty active in that.
Very cool.
I was able to become an Eagle Scout. And
so what was your project to become an Eagle Scout? Do you remember what you did?
All I did is I had to learn a lot of merit badges. I remember that.
Yeah.
And
did you enjoy it? Like being
sure,
outside?
Right. Oh, yeah, by all means, by all means.
Do you think that helped you maybe decide to join the military too? Or
no, not at all. There's altogether a specific reason why I did it, and we can get to that later. Okay?
Sure. And so you grew up in the Pittsburgh area, and did you have siblings, and how big was your family?
I had two brothers, one who's 10 years younger than me, and the middle one passed away here a couple of years ago.
Got it. And what were your parents immigrants?
Pardon?
Were your parents immigrants?
Dad was. Dad came to this country from we don't know for sure whether it was Poland or Russia.
Okay.
When he was 11 years old, and settled in Mars, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And my mother was born in Pittsburgh.
Got it. And what did your parents do growing up as like professions?
Well, Dad was in the scrap iron business, and Mother was pretty active. She was the president of the Ladies' Sisterhood for 16 years, and so we were pretty closely tied into the activities at the synagogue or the temple, whichever case it might have been.
Gotcha. And so with that, as you're growing up, did you always have an idea that you wanted to go to university and study? And what did you study when you were there?
Petroleum engineering.
Okay, perfect.
No, actually, I just knew I wanted to go to college. Mm-hmm. And the University of Pittsburgh was available to us. And I started out as a metallurgical engineer, and after one semester, I decided that I did not want to work in a laboratory, and I wanted to work outside, and I started reading about the oil business and decided I'd like to be a petroleum engineer. That's what I was.
Yeah, it must have been an interesting time, too, because what years did you go to university? Like
40 to 43. It was pretty active because the war was going on.
Right.
And actually, we didn't ever have any time off in the summer, so we could graduate in 3 years.
Okay, gotcha. With that, I mean, you've lived through so much. The Depression, bombing of Pearl Harbor. I mean, so many crazy events. Let's talk about when you finished university and you're at that time. I mean, obviously, 1941, December 7th, must have been almost the same way that we thought for our generation as 9/11. What was going through your mind when you heard on the radio about Pearl Harbor during that time? Do you remember?
I remember, but I remember the event, but I don't really remember what reaction I had to it.
Gotcha.
As we're talking some over 70 years ago.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. So what made you, after the university, to join the military then?
Well, it's a little interesting story in that my dad was on the local draft board for 21 years in Pittsburgh. So obviously all of my papers were at a different, I couldn't be under his jurisdiction. And when I went to the draft board, about a month before I graduated, they said, we're not supposed to draft you because you graduated from a school of mines. And all students from the school of mines were encouraged to go into industry, go into business, because the oil business was probably hurting for some technical support.
Right.
And so I left the draft board in kind of confused status, and knowing that my dad was on the draft board, although he absolutely had nothing to do with me, I went ahead and tied on with Texaco. And I took to Texaco because that was one of the few oil companies that hired Jews to go into the oil field drilling production business.
So
and
there was the industry wasn't exactly for hiring Jews at the time?
Absolutely. The Standard Oil Company, the Rockefellers, were pretty anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. And all that. One of the companies offered me a job working in a laboratory if I wanted to, and I said no. Texaco, when I told the manager that I was talking to, I was Jewish and I wanted to know if there would be any problems. He said, I don't give a damn what you are. as long as you want to go to the field and work your you-know-what off,
Toches.
that's all I care about. And so his name was Bill Herbert. And later on, I'll tell you, I ran into him again as they were trying to promote me to something else in the short period I was there, because when you went to work for Texaco, you worked in the field as a roustabout. And the only thing that's lower than a roustabout is what's at the bottom of the ocean. So they want you to learn the field work, and that's what I think I did pretty good.
Oh, that's great. And how long did you work for Texaco?
Worked for Texaco 11 and a half months, and I said, I've got to go in the service. I just cannot be out here knowing that my dad's doing what he's doing, and I didn't want any rumors going up anywhere, any place else. And so I came back and I volunteered, signed up in the Army. And that was the beginning of my military career. They sent me to Aberdeen, Maryland, where I had my basic training. And then I can give you the details of what happened after that if you'd like that now.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to ask, because it was, 44?
Yep, 43, 44.
And so with that, were they still needing people to join the service during that time? Because obviously
the draft board was still in effect.
Okay, gotcha.
But they just would not draft me.
And were they looking at you kind of funny that you wanted to volunteer when other people were getting drafted?
Well, the funny thing is Texaco didn't want me to leave. They were going to get me any kind of deferment. I needed to stay, and they said no. And when I called the draft board, they said, well, we still have this order that graduates from the School of Mines go into industry, not go into service. And I said, well, I'm going to come there, and I'm going into service. He said, well, we can't take you, but if you want to volunteer, I'll tell you where to go. And that's exactly what happened. And I joined and was shipped to Aberdeen, Maryland for basic training.
Great. So basic training, and then obviously they pick your job for you, and so you're gonna.
I didn't know what my job was, and since the war was coming to an end, I don't think they knew where I was needed at first. And so I spent probably about a month in Mississippi, and they just told us, get your barracks bag packed, we're sending you someplace else. And they told us when we got on the train, we're going to Aberdeen, Maryland. I said, I was just there. And they said, well, you're going to go again. And it was, I think, shortly before we got to Aberdeen, Maryland, that they mentioned that we're going to be going into bomb disposal. And I knew a little bit about it, but most people knew nothing about it because it was somewhat of a secretive type organization in the very beginning, and you had to volunteer to get in. And they must have liked me because they volunteered for me. And I joined the school there at Aberdeen, Maryland, in bomb disposal.
And with that, you think they picked you because you might have had some kind of ordnance experience from the oil and gas?
The only thing I can think of is they saw that I was an engineer by profession.
Got it.
And thought that I'd be a good candidate is all I can think of the reason.
Got it. So you end up at Aberdeen again.
Aberdeen, spent 4 months in school.
Okay.
From 8 in the morning till it got dark at night.
And how many people were with you going through the school at the time?
As best I can tell, there was either 14 or 21 because a squad was made up of 4 individuals. And I was in squad 218, as you can see, the 218 on my hat.
Yep.
That was the squad I was originally in. And we went through that. And I had a couple interesting experiences in the school. If you'd like to hear those, I can tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to hear it.
Okay. Shortly before we graduated, I had two events that I will always remember. And one was they took us into a big empty room that had nothing but benches along the walls. And opposite each bench there was a set of holes, several sets of holes, for people to sit down and put their hands through these holes. And that's when we started to learn, really hurry, about fuses, because they had bomb fuses on the other side of that wall, which you could not see,
Right.
but you could feel. And you had to be able to take them out, unscrew them, and basically put them back together again. And the fellow sitting next to me said, geez, all I got to do is flunk this test and it'll kick me out. And there was a non-com behind him. And he said, no, sir. You're going to pass this test if you have to keep coming back till you're 90 years old. You're not going to escape all the fun you're going to have in bomb disposal. So that was number one. Number two was we were called out. It was probably in one of the last few weeks of school, and told us we're going to the field. And they took us to the field. When they got out to the field, they said, there's a bunch of bombs on the ground out here. And it's going to be your job to look at the bombs and look at the nose of the bomb. The bombs will be either laying on the ground or partially in the ground. But you'll be able to dig out around the bomb to see what the nose of the bomb looks like. And they said, don't touch the bomb. Don't touch anything. They gave us a little spade and a steel brush. And they said, that's to clean off the nose of the bomb at what you see, but don't touch it. What was rather interesting was they told us that should we decide to talk to each other about what we're doing or to our friends, we would be court-martialed immediately. So we really had to understand this was kind of secretive. And so we did that. I guess there was something like about 20 bombs that we had to look at the fuses. And after he dug them all up, we were sent back to our barracks, and our departing words was, we were very sincere about what we told you about not talking about it. If you talk in your sleep, we're going to court-martial you. So you don't say anything to anything about what you've done. And somewhere after that, we heard or read in the paper that the Japanese fleet was destroyed off of Okinawa. And it was destroyed by virtue of the fact that we had what was known as a proximity fuse in the bombs. And those proximity fuses were the fuses that we dug up and took out so that they could see what happens when they hit the ground or hit something else. So that was a pretty interesting thing and an important thing.
Yeah. So as you're going through the training, did you feel a little bit of excitement in a sense of you're doing something, obviously, that's a little bit out of the realm of normal jobs? Did you guys take pride in that?
I would say that I know I did. I had fixed emotions. I wasn't mad at anybody.
Yeah.
And all I could think of after being told, that this is some pretty secretive work, that I was only uptight on the very first bomb that I had worked on. And after that, it just became something that, you had to do.
Gotcha.
And you go and get it done and come back.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until my last period in Japan, in Tokyo, that I was made a squad leader, and so I had a lot of knowledge and concern about what we were doing and about what the other people were doing too.
Right. And so you leave Aberdeen, you graduate from your job training, and where did they send you first?
Yeah, then we went to Oregon. I forget the camp now that was in Oregon. I mean, in Seattle, Oregon.
Uh-huh.
And 7 days of a boat trip, and I was seasick every single day of that seasick trip. We landed in Okinawa, landed in Hawaii, and we stayed in Hawaii for, I don't know, I guess it was 3 or 4 weeks. We were sent there because the Army, Air Corps, had wanted to return the bombing ranges to the farmers in Hawaii. And apparently they were having a little trouble negotiating on how this was going to be done because we never did go to the field.
Right.
3 to 4 weeks, we were on another boat to Okinawa, and that's where bomb disposal work really began for us in Okinawa.
Got it. And so Okinawa was already fully taken by the U.S.?
It was taken, and the reason we were going to Okinawa was that when Okinawa was captured, it was going to be a stepping stone to Tokyo. It's not too far from Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a tremendous arms collection there. And at night, some of the Japanese soldiers that would not surrender took off to the hills, and they would come out at night looking for food and probably ammunition, but I imagine food mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And they got into this building, this big storage building of all kinds of arms, and they blew it up by mistake. And our trip to Hawaii was to clean up that mess. And it was about the size, I would say about 2 or 3 football fields was how this stuff was scattered.
And so with the techniques that the military uses now, I'm sure you guys perfected it with the stick and trying to push down into the ground and see what was around.
Well, I like to say yes, but in one of my lectures that I've given here at Fort Carson, they took me into the back room and showed me all of the equipment they're now using, the EOD.
Mm-hmm.
No comparison at all to what we had.
Yeah. I have a friend who is he was an EOD guy in Afghanistan with the Air Force.
Yes.
And he's going to be very interested to hear your story, so I'm super excited that you're able to tell it.
Well, the thing is that I saw things in their room there that I didn't believe.
Mm-hmm.
It was anything what we looked like, had to work with. Most of the stuff we had was an 18-inch pipe wrench, a screwdriver, a ball-peen hammer, and the ball-peen hammer, screwdriver, and some other normal tools that you would have in your toolbox in your garage at home.
Yeah, you showed us when you came to speak to our
Well,
group.
you saw that stuff.
Yeah, it is.
That's what we had to work with.
And for those that don't know what he's talking about, it's literally like the size of a woman's purse, basically, with stuff in it, and that was it. So it's night and day compared to how they started versus what they have now.
Yeah, it was a learning experience for us.
And so with that, did your guys that you trained with, did everybody go together to Asia? Or?
Actually, no. We stayed together when we went to Hawaii. And then when we got to Okinawa, we were put into some different squads. And I went into, I got to keep looking, I got it mixed up, 156.
Okay.
Squad 156. And later on when I got to Japan, it was 106.
Gotcha.
So I had the pleasure of being with different people in the different squads.
And how did it work? Were you attached to other units, or were you your own unit?
We were really an independent, not too much advertised group. And we were always assigned to somebody for food, sleeping quarters.
Gotcha.
We were there, but we weren't there because we had nothing to do with the 1st Cavalry Division, which was the division I was sent to in Japan.
Gotcha. And how did the unit that you were generally attached to, how did they treat you guys? Were they kind of suspicious? Were they kind of...
Oh, they were extremely glad to see us. They liked to talk to us. But we didn't have much time to talk to too many people.
I imagine.
And we had our own little world that we lived in. And as far as the Army goes, we were, just treated as, who are you? And they called us when they needed us. And then when we got to, after we left Okinawa, which was probably the most scary thing, if we want to call it that I went through.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't have anything to do with a bomb. It had thing to do with hand grenades. When the big storage of equipment on Okinawa blew up, it blew hand grenades. They must have had, I don't know, a whole lot.
Yeah.
And we found them buried in the ground. And we were told, we were given a bunch of pins and handles for hand grenades, American hand grenades, and they just said, you're very lucky you have a choice. You can either kick it or you can pick it up and inert it. There was damn little kicking going on, I'll tell you, because we found some of these things when the pins were out, and we had to dig out around it and put the pin back in and the handle. We had, if you remember, I showed you how we screened what we were looking at. We had 4 people up front and 2 in the back.
Right.
The squad was 6 people. And we were about, 17 to 20 feet apart. 2 in the back, 4 in the front.
Mm-hmm.
And we walked on down, and anything we saw, we either had to inert it or pick it up. Now, most of the stuff we were able to pick up. Hand grenades, not.
Yeah.
And then one case that we ran into was one of the boys in the front row was working on one that started to smoke on him. And in his desire to get rid of that, he grabbed the hand grenade and pitched it underhand. He didn't have enough room or time to think about winding up like a baseball and throwing it.
Right.
So he pitched it underhand. And in this whole area, there were about 3 trees that we can remember. And you could bet your boots what happened. That grenade hit one of those trees that was right in the middle of where we were, bounced back, and landed between the 2 in the back and the 4 in the front. I was one of the 2 in the back. And it fizzled, but when he threw it, he said, hit the dirt. And I was a human ditch digger because I was digging a hole pretty deep to run to lay in, and so did everybody else.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it kept on smoking, and finally smoked and fizzled out. And it didn't go off. So I said, let's go back to headquarters. We did, and got our nerves back together again. But we were in the field, say, 3 to 4 days. Then we take off 3 to 4 days.
Got it.
To let us get our nerves back together again.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did you feel that your team was trained well enough, or was it just a lot of trial and error as you got out there?
A lot of it was trial and error and watching what the more experienced people did. Like on in Okinawa, we had to really learn ourselves till we really knew just what to do and how to do it. But after Okinawa, we all felt pretty comfortable.
1 second. Okay, you're good.
But after Okinawa, we all felt pretty comfortable to what we were doing, how to do it, and we did the bombs in Japan, and so a very close knit group. We learned to be close knit and learned to be always aware of not only yourself but the guys that were working with you, and like I say, nobody was ever killed in our group, but I know a lot of people were killed in bomb disposal.
When you go through an experience like that, have you ever had the depth in a relationship the way you had with those guys after you left the military with anybody?
Oh, some of the people that I ran into and I was harassed about, learning from them.
Yeah.
And different kind of learning. And you know, in bomb disposal, you were learning because you knew you had to learn. Whereas it's a little different when you're out working for a living.
Yeah.
And doing the kind of work that you do as a roustabout in the oil fields.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. So you leave Oki, and then you're going to mainland Japan. And was Japan already...
The war was over, obviously. And we were... the first cab was on the outskirts of Tokyo itself.
Gotcha.
And like I say, we couldn't have asked for any better treatment. The only thing that was a problem with me was that I found somewhat troublesome. We were always called by some officer, someplace, to do this or do that, or that we found this and we found that. And we would always ask, well, what do you want us to do with it when we don't bother us? That's your job. He said, you take care of it. We'll show you where it is, and then you go ahead and take care of it. So that's what we did. And there was one officer. I was like the head of the squad. I was a tech sergeant. And I know that the first day that we all got together in Japan was a young fellow. He was, I guess, a second or first lieutenant, nice guy. He said he's been to a military school, and they didn't teach any bomb disposal subjects in bomb disposal school. So he said, you guys take care of it. You do what you want to do. But we knew what to do, and at least we thought we knew what to do.
So what was that feeling like going to Japan after going through Okinawa and getting to mainland Japan? And obviously we know that the U.S. bombed Japan heavily.
Yes.
And so with that, what was your job to go in there and actually do afterwards? Are you...
Well, it's... You know, one of the stories I will tell you in Japan was about taking some pictures and seeing people. And I've got some pictures in one of these books that I've taken of kids in Japan. you never see these little kids with smiles on their faces. And you realize what these kids have gone through with all that bombing, and that they never will be all right in their whole life, probably.
Right.
And that was sad. I was really sad about that. But the Japanese people, the police chief who we reported to daily, and the Japanese union people, who we had to deal with because they would go get, kids to help us lift this stuff. These kids were maybe about 14, 15 years old. And they were always trying to do what they were told to do, but we had to watch them. And in one case, one of the kids got his hands blown off, fingers blown off, because he fooled around with some fuses and he shouldn't.
Right.
But that was the sad part when we took him to the hospital. And the union fellow had called to have his mother there. And she came in and she started crying. And I can only tell you the Japanese mothers are just like American mothers when it comes to their kids. And that was a sore thing for me to absorb.
Well, I can imagine. And how old was the kid? Teenager?
I guess he was 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
He couldn't see, anybody that was in the Army didn't want to get close to us.
Right.
They were afraid that we might try to shoot them or kill them because although we originally were carrying hand 45 guns in our pants leg, kind of. And then you can't work very good with that around your leg, so we stopped doing that. And we never had any problem whatsoever with any Japanese males that we had to come in contact with.
Any close calls for you in Japan as far as you're not sure what's going to happen with this particular device or anything else that was going on?
I didn't quite understand. Repeat.
Any close calls where you were just, you went to go handle something and then you were like, phew, okay, that was, I need a couple days off.
I would say no. Well, one case, we were called to go into the hillside. They found a bunch of ammunition in a cave.
Mm.
So, and I'll tell you another story, but that one we went in and we forgot our fuse cord. And so we found some, what we thought, in this cave, and we strung it out and we walked far enough away so we'd be safe. And we set it off and nothing happened. And one of the things that we learned in bomb disposal, when something like that happens, you walk away from it for 24 hours, then come back.
Okay.
And we did. We came back, and we said, let's go ahead and rig it up. We went back up with our own fuse cord, hooked it up, set it off, and we're standing way far away, and it didn't explode.
Mm.
And I wouldn't ask anybody else to do it, so I said, I'm just going to go up and check it. We've been here once, we've been through this one time. And I walked about 100 feet, and boy, she blew up.
Oh, wow.
And the moral of that story is obey the rules. If it doesn't go off when you said it, come back in 24 hours. And we came back in 24 hours, but we didn't want to come back another 24 hours.
Right.
So that was a pretty close call.
Yeah.
And that we had, and that was outskirts of Tokyo.
Got it. And were you dismantling our own munitions, or were you dismantling a lot of the Japanese stuff?
In fact, we didn't hardly have any Japanese stuff. Because if we had any Japanese stuff, we blew it up. We always found in these storage rooms that we found caves, several, and we did clean out several caves.
Got it.
And when especially the kid got his fingers blown off, that was almost in town.
Oh.
And so we knew pretty much what we had to do, and we tried to cart off as much. So they would load it in a truck, and the truck would take it to a barge. The barge would take it out in the water and dump it. That's where we got rid of most of that stuff.
Got it.
And we did have a lot of small thermite bombs, about 3 to 4 foot long.
Mm-hmm.
We found some of those in the streets. And the only thing they did was to start fire.
Got it.
And we found several of those, but they were pretty easy. You could almost unscrew the fuse with your fingers.
And so, this is an interesting question, I guess. Were you in Okinawa when we bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima?
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. When we set off the atomic bombs.
Correct, yeah. Were you in Japan area during that time?
I suspect they were there after that happened.
That's what I thought.
Because I don't think there was any soldiers on Japan when they dropped those bombs.
Right.
So we would not have been there. And I did not go
anywhere close there.
Go and look it over.
Got it.
Maybe if I can't think what I was thinking back then, but maybe I didn't want to see it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
I may have not wanted to see it.
Yeah. And so your time in Japan, did you feel that you were doing good things to help the Japanese out by getting rid of these munitions?
By all means, because there was enough bombs dropped that did not go off, that they didn't have to go off for Japan to lose the war.
Right.
They were completely inundated. And so, the bombs that we worked on were either in the schoolyards, hospitals, or large business complexes.
Yeah.
And I'll show you some pictures of the one that we pulled out of the schoolyard. I got that.
Yeah, we'll definitely take some looks in the pictures and put them on the video as well, just to show as we're talking right now.
Right.
We can show those at the same time you're talking.
Right.
So, and what did you overall feel about the Japanese people as your time ended in Japan?
Well, I always had a real good working relationship with the Japan. I hope we got a picture of the chief of police. He was so very nice to us. We would come there every morning and tell him where we're going, what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And when I had my orders, and I'll tell you the story about that, which is interesting. When I finally got the orders to come home, I went over to the police station to say goodbye to him. I almost think he had a tear in his eye because we were very nice to him. And in turn, he took me by the hand and took me in the back room where they had a bunch of these Japanese dress swords.
Yeah.
And he insisted that I take 2 of them for my kids.
Oh, wow. So
I took them and they got them. But I thought that was very nice. He was very, very nice. In fact, nobody would.
Uh-oh.
Who's there?
Sharon.
Pardon?
Hi.
Sharon.
Hold on.
Oh, you're fine.
Can we take a break?
Yeah, you can take a break.
Okay, let's take it.
You were leaving Japan, and the guy was...
Well, before I left Japan, there was another job that I had, and if you looked on the door, there's a 2-man Japanese submarine there.
Okay.
And we got a call to go take care of that. What are you going to do? Take care of it? You take care of it. And we did. I've got some pictures of the explosion that took place with the Japanese submarine.
Okay.
And the Japanese submarine was down at the base of the hill that we were in, near a body of water, so that they could get it out to the sea.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he discussed, my crew there discussed, someone, I think as I recall, said, well, let's go inside the submarine and see what we can do. And I said, no, I thought about it, I said, no. And we couldn't truck it out of there, that was for sure.
Right.
And I don't know, and I think they had taken the tracks up, some of the tracks. So I knew we had to blow it up, wanted to do something. And you'll see the pictures. And we're at the top of the hill and about a quarter of a mile down. And when it went off, we sat there. We heard something whistle over our head. It's probably one of the trees on the side. But you see, wood doesn't whistle when it flies over your head. So wood, it doesn't whistle.
Oh, yeah.
And this was a piece of steel. I said, I'm not interested in seeing it. Let's get the hell out of here. So we all got in our Jeep and we drove away. But that was a real unique job that we had. And like I say, you'll see some of the pictures of that.
And then lastly, when you left Japan, did you have a greater appreciation of the culture and the values that they had in their society? Because it's been...
the only feeling that I had was one of pretty deep sorrow for the small kids that I saw.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pictures of the kids here, and they don't see smiles.
And these are the kids that were helping you out?
Oh, no. These were kids walking in the street with their parents.
Oh.
And they look and have a funny look in their face, and and also the mother crying when her son got injured.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of thought across your mind, and you do have, even though they killed many Americans,
right?
And we had every reason to want to do the same to them, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
But when you're next to somebody in an area like that, and you see, you can't help but have some degree of sorrow.
Absolutely. And so you get your orders to come home. And what year was that?
Oh, that'd be, let's see,
45, 46?
46.
Got it.
On the week before I left there, somebody came. We had a job to go up to northern Japan. Somebody had found a bunch of kegs of nitroglycerin. And so called on bomb disposal to go ahead and do something about it. So I said, fine, we're going to take to myself, I said, we're going to take a look first. And if it's what I think it is, then I'll probably want to try to find some Japanese chemical engineer or something to know just how we could handle it. And on Friday, this was on a Thursday, and we were going to, let's see, it was on Thursday, and I'm not clear on the time. However, we had to cancel it. That's right. We're going to go up on Thursday. It rained. That's it. It rained on Thursday, and we're going to fly up in a little Piper Cub type thing. And but they didn't like to fly on a Thursday. It ruined their weekend, they said. So let's do it next week. I said, okay. And so we're waiting around. It's Thursday or Friday, and somebody said, Jerry, your name's on the bulletin board. So I rush over there and look, see what it was. And it was telling me that I'm to go home for discharge. And I go into the colonel in charge of the 1st Cav Division there. And he thanked me profusely, and I made sure he realized he's thanking the whole squad because nobody could have done what we did by ourselves.
Right.
And he said, incidentally, and this is a true story, and it doesn't sound true, but it is. He said, would you be interested in staying for a couple of years? He said, I can get you a field commission if you'll stay. And I waited about 10 seconds, and I said, I've been pretty lucky, and I don't want to stretch my luck. And he kind of laughed. He said, hell, I don't blame you, son. He said, I'd do the same thing if I was in your shape. So that was the way we ended my career there. And but I thought it was very nice to be asked to do that.
Yeah, no, I can imagine getting field commission is
field commission.
It's a great honor because I see a lot of potential in you. You know,
well, there weren't very many bomb disposal schools. The war was over, and it sounded like to me in '48 that they were not planning to do any more bomb disposal schoolwork,
right?
Because they shut it down, I think, in early '50 when the EOD became involved. But
so you demob, you get back to the U.S. What was that? Do you remember like getting home, like how that felt like?
I had an interesting experience when I got home. I was sent to Fort Meade, Maryland, and who do I run into? My middle brother, who's 5 years younger than me.
Okay.
He's there, and we ran in. It was nice to see him, and he told me he's in the bedpan division. What's that? He said, I'm in the medical corps and in Fort Meade, we're emptying the pans. So we laughed and said, let's go have some dinner. So we went into Baltimore for dinner. He had a little mustache. We sit down, and the waitress comes over to ask us for what we'd like to drink. My brother says something, and she said, I'm sorry to me, you don't look like you're 21, you'd have to show us your card. God damn it.
All right, so we're talking about your brother and you guys going out in Baltimore.
We went into an Italian restaurant because we both liked Italian food. And when she said, if you don't have a card, I can't give you it. You don't look old enough. And my brother, who was 5 years younger, she says, ma'am, I can vouch for him. He's very old. He's my older brother. So go ahead, it's okay. So my brother, younger brother, got clearance for me to have a drink at the bar in Baltimore. So, but I was there and was discharged from there and headed home.
Gotcha.
And stayed a couple weeks at home and then headed back to Texas.
Okay. You went to work, and so after your service time, you went to go work back for Texaco?
Texaco, right.
Okay. And then when you were working in Texaco, where did you start working? In Texas or some other place?
All my work with Texaco was in West Texas.
Yeah.
Headquarters were Midland and Odessa, Texas.
Yeah. I know some people from over there.
Okay. And I was supposed to roustabout. I was told you're going to roustabout for maybe a year before we give you engineering privileges, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
He says, because you don't know nothing all about the old business, and that's the only way you're going to learn. And I said, fine. So I went to Odessa. They were so nice to me. They picked me up at the train station in Midland and talked to me a little bit, and then had somebody drive me to Odessa. And they had me a room at a junior high school teacher's residency there.
Got it.
And another roustabout lived there who had a car. And our field of roustabouting was 17 miles west of there, a place called Penwell, Texas.
Okay.
And there's a big oil field out there, Texaco. And so that's how I started my work again with Texaco.
And then what you learned in school, did it apply to what you were doing?
Oh, yes. And listen, I made a mistake. Let me correct something. When I came back to the service, I just reported to Midland, and then they assigned me to a field.
Okay.
After the service. It was when I was over there the first time after school that they found me a place to stay in Midland, in Odessa.
Got it.
For my roustabouting career.
Gotcha. And then, so you're in West Texas. It's an interesting time in the United States, too, because obviously the wars ended. Truman, obviously one of the most influential presidents we had as far as decisions that he had to make. But also during that time, Israel became a country. Do you remember anything about that time and how you felt or anything like that?
No, as I try to remember, I was just so happy to go back to work again.
Yeah.
One of the things I can say without reservation, I loved the jobs I had as a petroleum engineer.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind if I had to do it again, I would.
Yeah.
And so when I came back this time, they let me go ahead and, when I first went after college, after 4 months of roustabouting, they came and said, we need you to do some engineering work. So my career at roustabouting ended, and I became a petroleum engineer with them. And again, I was just delighted. I didn't think world could be any nicer than the way I was treated with Texaco. When I came back after the service, one of the assistant managers for Texaco kind of somewhat adopted me because many of the other engineers were back working by that time, and they all were married. And petroleum engineering, there's no such thing as a 7-day week. You have 8 and 9 days with no weeks. And so I was given that, and this one assistant manager, co-manager, took a liking to me because I was single. Mm-hmm. And he didn't mind having me go out on the weekends when there was problems. So I learned a tremendous amount of knowledge
Yeah.
during my period with them.
That's great. And so you were in Texas for how long, and then where else did you do your job at around the world, you said?
Well, I stayed with Texaco a couple more years. When I say about, when I came back, about Texaco, I left Texaco to go to work for a consultant.
Okay.
And after the consultant work, I decided that I really would like to become involved in offshore drilling and so forth. And so I got a pretty good job with Conoco in New Orleans. And was a petroleum engineer for them. And I worked offshore for 2 years. And then one of the companies that I had worked for as a consultant back in Midland, shortly after I left Texaco, called me and said, I'd like to have you come to work. I've heard about you. And Max Fisher, who was a big man in Republican politics, and actually a tremendously large donator and supporter to Israel.
Okay.
Worked for a company there in Michigan. And it was his company also that I worked for when I left Texaco to go in the consulting business.
Got it.
And they remembered me, and they asked if I would like to come back up and go to work for an outfit called McClure Oil Company.
Okay.
Which I did. And
so during this time, as you're moving around a little bit and everything, where did you meet your wife if you're working all the time?
Well, I got married when I was living in Midland.
Okay, got it.
And so I was gone some of the time, and some of the time I wasn't. But she had a cousin who was married and lived in Midland, and so she had company. It worked out pretty good.
Oh, that's good.
And besides that, we had to come in once in a while because my daughter was born there.
Ah.
She's a real Texan.
There you go.
And so that's what we did.
Gotcha.
In Midland.
And so you worked for McClure?
McClure Oil Company. And I worked for them for about 10 years. I was a VP there of production.
Okay.
And then I had a good offer from an outfit called Patrick Petroleum. And I retired there after 18 years.
Okay. And what brought you to Denver?
Well, after I went to work, after I retired from Patrick, I moved to, was divorced, got divorced, and I moved to Albuquerque and took up archaeology as a hobby.
Oh, nice.
And went to school there at the university and spent a few years as an amateur archaeologist.
Very nice.
And while I got bored with the archaeology after a couple of years, I was contacted by one of the Indian tribes in the Four Corners area.
Like the Navajo Nation or somebody else?
The Ute Mountain Ute tribe.
Oh, okay, got it.
And and the Hickory Apache tribe. Worked with Hickory Apache, and the Mountain Ute did some work jointly with the Navajos. And after about 15 years of all of that, I decided it's time to go. I was getting 70 years experiences. Couldn't do me any good. Nobody hired you for 70 years old. I mean, 90 years old, because that's what it was after 70 years of experience. And the kids took a vote and said, you got to live near one of us. And that was one of them that just called. He lives here in Denver.
Got it. I met him at the meeting.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he did come to that meeting.
He did, yeah.
Right. And so here I am now, taking care of myself in the medical profession.
Man, you just have like such a interesting life, and I truly admire that you kind of did it your way.
Yeah.
You know, I really respect that.
I was very lucky because, you know, so many kids, including my own, go to school, go to college, get out, and decide they didn't like what they studied.
Mm-hmm.
So many, or they end up with something else.
Yeah.
And I still can't quite understand it. But I truly loved what I did. And not if I was asked to do it again, there would be no hesitation on my part.
What, you know, talking with the younger people, I mean, obviously you have grandkids, you have, you know, kids of your own. What advice would you give people, knowing that you led a very fulfilling life? You know, our culture is really, we chase a dream in some ways, and sometimes it doesn't work out. What would you say to somebody that came to you that's like 18 years old and wanted to get some advice from somebody that's lived a great life?
Well, the odds are that when you come out of school, unless you go to law school or medical school, you really have got to what is, well, how would you put it? You're going to have to work your tail off.
Yeah.
Unless your dad and mama's very rich. And if you got to work, you got to work and work at something you like. And I assume that if you've gone to college, you have some idea what you like.
Yeah.
And the thing that I found kind of controversial in my own mind is, you know, especially if you're married, that number one, you got to like where you live,
Mm-hmm.
first of all.
Yeah.
And as well as like what you do. And if you don't satisfy those two things, you're just not going to be very happy.
Yeah.
For the rest of your life.
Did you find happiness in the journey or the people that you were with, or is that all all together?
Both.
Yeah.
I met some unusual people. I don't know whether you should brag about it, but you know, I had dinner with Meyer Lansky.
Oh, wow.
You know who Meyer Lansky
Yeah,
is?
I know definitely who Meyer Lansky is.
I had dinner with him.
Wow.
I did some...
Tell me about that. Like, how did that come about, and how...
Well, he was representing his group,
Mm-hmm.
the rest in the oil business.
Okay.
And the guy that I'm talking about was Pat Patrick.
Oh,
And when I was working with Pat Patrick, I ran into Meyer Lansky.
got it.
And yeah, I barely knew that much about him.
Right.
I learned a little bit more about him when I found out who he was.
Yeah.
And also Marie Callender, the fellow who owned that, I'm trying to think of his name. He was Jewish, and he invested with McClure Oil Company, and so I'd have to go in there periodically and bring him up to date on his investments.
Got it.
And he was just the nicest guy you could ever see. And he was a big art collector, and I wish I'll remember, hopefully, his name. And others that I've met, as I just told you, I now think very few people have shaken hands with a brigadier, major, and the other two generals standing. And she called me last night to tell me about her promotion to do so.
General
the
Hoyle.
Army has really been nice to me here.
Yeah.
And when they ask me to do something, it's unbelievable. They'll send a car for me. If it's overnight, they'll get a hotel for me.
That's great.
And like I say, there's not many people, I don't think, that have been honorary members of the EOD.
You're right.
I may be the only one. And the thing is, I think what is interesting with them is they recognize that I probably am the last living bomb disposal technician today.
Right.
That graduated from bomb disposal school, the original bomb disposal school.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that's, I guess, something I can be proud of. So.
Absolutely. I mean, and then what, obviously you worked your tail off probably since college and everything else. How did you balance your work life and your passion with your family?
Well, that probably is a sad point in my life because my mother and dad and brothers lived in Pittsburgh when I took off for West Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always call the folks every Thursday and talk to them. And that, I would say, would be one of the very, 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 very few things that I wish I had been able to do something different as far as the family was concerned.
Yeah.
I guess I liked so much what I was doing, well, it's like anything else. If you like what you're doing, you probably don't realize what's going on around you.
Absolutely.
And that would be a sad part of my life.
What would you have done different, do you think? Just visit them a little bit more, or?
Well, the only thing I tried to do was get transferred to Tulsa, Oklahoma, because I could get a nonstop flight from there back to Pittsburgh to see the folks.
Gotcha.
But they wouldn't transfer me. They said, we need you too much down here.
Yeah.
Not that I was that good, but I was just an engineer that they just had it, because that was Texaco's biggest area, was West Texas.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's tough, like I wrestle with that as well. Like when you're happy and you're doing the things that you really like.
Yeah.
I get very, like tunnel vision, where I just focus and the things around me keep moving, but I'm not concentrating on that because it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm sure that enters in this day and age where transportation Nobody thinks about jumping on an airplane if it has something to do in California.
Yeah.
You really have to do it. And if you don't have the money, you'll find you'll get the money.
Yeah.
And I know when the kids, I had the two girls at one time lived in L.A. One now lives in North Carolina. And Todd lives here, and his brother lives in Salt Lake City. And when I was traveling, I could get out to see them once in a while.
Yeah.
And there would be no hesitation on my part if I could fly. But with this virus and thing,
Right.
you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And I have to count on them coming here. And besides, it's so tough getting around now. Sometimes.
Yeah.
After all, 98, I can't go bowling and I can't do jogging. So, yeah.
Well, Jerry, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for your time, and it's been super fun getting to know you.
Think nothing of it. I want you to take a look at some of these pictures and
Yeah, we'll definitely. I'll make copies of them,
if
and
you want to do that.
yeah, we'll definitely show them off and see if we can get folks interested in the EOD as an industry, and obviously seeing the differences and what you have now versus what
They've
the
got
folks
a
are.
big department out here at Fort Carson.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
It's big, and they called me, let's see, 2 times, 3 times. I've been to Virginia, and that's where I met General Hoyle there. And I even gave a talk here to the Submarine Club. I didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah, I know Don Price. Don Price is part of the Jewish War Veterans. So.
Yeah.
But-
But like I say, it's been kind of a lifesaver for me because living a life here is no panacea for sure. And although I'm probably one of the oldest people here, I think I act more young than most of the people that are younger than I am here.
Yeah, and
Plus the fact that many of them are here with their wives or husbands, whatever
sure.
might be. The camaraderie was a lot greater when I was here originally. But I think the virus has turned up everybody upside down as to what they can do and what they should do, and where they can go, and so forth.
But I think honestly the difference is that you've led a very fulfilling life, and I think sometimes a lot of people, when they get to this point in their life, they start to regret things, and I don't think you have a lot of that, which I think is amazing.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's very true. I mean, I worked in over half the states that have oil. I've worked and did some work in them.
Yeah.
And I also have worked on some wells with the company in the North Sea.
Okay.
And also helped drill a well in Israel.
Oh, nice.
And also did a lot of work, which never amounted to anything, in Peru. So, and from one end of Canada, I've worked on wells.
Yeah.
And so, I've done a whole lot.
Oil man through and through, right?
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you again so much, and I really appreciate your time. It's been super humbling to be with you and talking with you about your career and everything else.
You're quite welcome.
So,
I'm always glad to talk about the oil business.
There you go.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, hopefully some people would definitely get something out of this, and I definitely will send you a copy of everything once we're done.
And if anybody has any questions about oil, or actually if anybody here, this is what I like to do. Mm-hmm. If anybody gets approached to invest in an oil well, because you got a lot of oil in Weld County, a lot of activity.
Yeah.
I'll be glad to help them, and there's no charges.
Okay.
But I just like to work on things like that, help people, help them understand just what they're getting into.
Okay. I'll definitely keep a lookout for that.
Okay.
Well, thanks again.
You're welcome.
The show is produced and engineered by myself, Ben, out of Denver, Colorado. Be sure to subscribe to our social media or wherever you consume content, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Big shout out to Mike Xavier. Thank you so much for letting us use your music as part of our show. Be sure to check him out as well on social media. And stay tuned for the next show.